All right, so on behalf of Moviola and Filmtools, I do want to thank everybody for taking the time to come out. This is our first time trying this format, and it's, a influencer coming to talk about their craft. We do have to thank our sponsors, so really want to thank Tom from Airy for providing the lights that's actually being used with his remote control over there in the Skylink to record the podcast. Panasonic's got their new camcorder over here that we're using. This will be the first time we're actually recording video, and we'll be posting this on YouTube as well as our usual podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, and the rest of the streaming services. And then Mike Lipson from Miller for providing all the camera support. Thank you. Also want to thank Joey Cabellas from Filmcraft for providing the director's chair that we'll be raffling off later on. Miller's also providing a raffle item, and then we got some Filmtools swag we'll be handing out. So I want to go ahead and take this opportunity to invite Avery Pascal up on the stage. We got Paul McKenna back here being the man behind the curtain doing all the magic, and Cole Walliser, obviously, who is our influencer, director, and man of the hour.
It's tight in here.
All right, so go ahead and get that mic up close to you, and I'll start the podcast here. So we'll go ahead and let Cole tell his story, and then we'll open up that mic over here in the corner for any questions, and we'll allow you guys to ask anything that you want to know about Cole's story that we don't cover. So this is Joe Nunez.
Oh, me? Cole Walliser. What's up?
Avery Pascal.
And Paul McKenna.
And this is the Filmtools podcast. So Cole, I think everyone here is interested to hear about your story and how did you get started? Where do you see yourself now? And where do you want to go with your vision and your craft, right? So let's start off with how'd you get started?
Well, I started with skateboarding. So I used to skateboard as a kid, and obviously you wanted to film each other, when you're skateboarding. And it just happened that people kept handing me the camera more often than not. Like, oh, Cole, you film cool stuff. You know how to get dope shots. Yeah. So I just had the camera a lot, and then I started figuring out how to edit with 2 VCRs and what makes a shot interesting.
What's a VCR?
Exactly, right? Yeah. So I'm aging myself, but it's fine. So, but that's really where it started, and where I realized that creating something from nothing was something that I love doing.
So was that, I dug through your Instagram.
Great.
Was that the Sponsor Me video? Was that the one that you were filming, or was that someone filming for you? Was that sort of the start of?
So back then I did not yet master the selfie video
sure.
skateboarding. That's a newer skill I've adopted. But yeah, back then we'd all film each other. You know what I mean? But that was really a moment where I realized that holding the camera was something that I really enjoyed and liked expressing myself through what I could create through a lens.
Sure.
So where were you doing the skating? Where did you grow up? What was the crowd?
Vancouver, Canada. So I'm Canadian.
Okay.
There's a great skate scene up there. Yeah. Put up Canada.
In the house.
So in Vancouver, and it's a great environment because there is a big film industry up there. So it had presence in my life. I did extra work when I was a teenager, so I got to see set, and I knew film was a thing you could do, but it didn't seem that tangible until I realized that I need to move out to LA, to make it happen.
So at what age did the bug actually bite you?
Filmmaking bug?
Yeah, the filmmaking bug.
I pretty early. Even before skateboarding, I remember my dad had a huge VHS camera.
This is a recurring story on the Filmtools podcast. Yeah. Everybody's talking about these VHS cameras. So what's VHS?
Yeah. So we had one of those, and I remember filming my sister and my cousins, and we would make silly music videos.
Yeah.
And so even back then, it was always Cole with the camera, shooting stuff. It was just obviously just for fun, but I think that having that early experience just really opened my eyes to, again, creating something with a camera. Really, I just found that interesting and fascinating.
So was it always for you, was it music videos, reality sort of things, or was it ever narrative? Were you ever going into, fun, creative avenues that way?
Early on, I definitely started telling narrative stories. It was really just anything. We did silly skits, music videos, early on. When I started working, it's obviously a bit easier to get a job directing a short form thing rather than an entire feature. So that's where my career started originally. But yeah, narrative has always been the goal, even now.
Love that. So when did it go from filming in Canada, messing around with the camera, to actually saying, okay, I need to be in LA, I need to be in the scene?
I think as I went to university, I have a degree in psychology, and as I was going through school, all my time was just spent filming. So I'd go film my friends. I'd do like, not the minimum amount of work, but like I would try, but like it was always like I'd stay up late editing, you know, I would do my schoolwork, of course. I passed, I have a degree.
So what were you editing on?
I'm sorry?
What were you editing on?
I started on Final Cut 4. I think, yeah.
Nice.
Like Final Cut 4 like just came out, and it was like the new technology.
So I did fail to mention, we are at the Moviola building. It's a post house, so really want to thank Moviola for making this space available. And obviously they're doing, you know, Final Cut, Avid, and Premiere. So you started off on Final Cut 4. And how was that journey of learning to edit? What were you doing? It was all NLE, right?
Yeah. All NLE, and it was like, you know, there wasn't even YouTube back then. So it was literally like I read, I don't know, I mean, there was internet, but it was like you'd read something on how to import footage and you'd try to like figure out what they were talking about. So a lot of hours like sitting there poking around with the mouse trying to figure out what to do. And then I also like would ask people that had more experience than me. And I found that super, super valuable because I wasn't going to film school. I would reach out to people that I knew how to do things, and they would always share their advice with me. And that's a big thing. And that's the thing why I like doing this type of stuff now. Like I like giving back because that's literally how I learned, you know, how to be a filmmaker.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of what we're doing here is trying to give back. I think that it is the peer-to-peer thing that people really enjoy and take the most away from. You can sit there and read books, you can sit there and watch videos, but actually having somebody's time and attention to ask the questions where, you know, your knowledge needs to be, like the gap needs to be filled, that's where the most value is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like the transfer of information is so easily done and like readily available now. I just think that like that's how we all move forward, is just sharing our ideas. And if I can say anything that inspires, but like just any bit of knowledge that anybody finds useful, it's like I'm happy to do it and I'm happy to share.
Well, I find your story super inspiring. I mentioned to you earlier, so I look at your Instagram and I see, you know, when you started posting and you're in the yellow hatchback that evolved into like a Beamer, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That's now evolved into this Mercedes two-door.
Yeah.
You know, and every time I think about that, it's like I'm gonna see a two-door Mercedes white, you know, G-Wagon. That's cool, man. You know, and that's amazing, right? So you see the evolution of somebody's career and everything they're doing, and everything from like what you were posting then to what you're posting now. So you're doing a lot of Glambot stuff on E, right?
Yeah. I mean, to touch on the car thing, it's like I've been on Instagram for the span of 3 cars, so it's been a while since I've been on Instagram, and only recently has it like really popped off for me as far as like, you know, the growth of what I've been doing. But it is interesting you mentioned the cars. It's funny how you frame it where you're like, oh, Cole has the two-door G-Wagon, that's identifiable. I think that's like a useful thing, but I wasn't really so much like, oh, let me get this because this will be my identity. It's just like, I love that truck, I think it's super cool, you know, and obviously I'm taking pictures and sharing it, so it's like it then becomes a part of who I am and identifiable, which I think is like a cool part and also interesting facet of what social media is.
Well, it's funny what's marketable, right? When we send out the invite for this event, someone's mentioning your hair. I'll notice that hair anywhere, right? And it's like, I'll notice that G-Wagon anywhere, right? And it's like everything you do is part of your brand. It's part of marketing, right? And even if you don't set off with the intention of that being part of your brand, people pick up on all those subtleties, right?
Oh yeah, I mean the hair is super, like it really works as far as being identifiable, and I think that like I recognize that, and I'm kind of just like, well, I might as well just capitalize on it. You know what I mean? So it's like if I think even like for the Glambot stuff, you know, it's like talent comes up and, you know, I see 20, 30, 50 people a day, but they see this guy with the hair, and I think they like, if they've done the other events, like, oh, like I know this guy, and it's helpful. And even on social, it's like you see the Glambot, and like, oh, that's cool. And then you see this guy with massive like curly hair, and you're like, okay, I understand that. And it's like I get sort of like recognized from that. But it's great in the sense that I think having an identifiable trait just that connects me with something like the Glambot is just beneficial for me as my career as a director.
For sure.
So they know it's like that guy with the hair. I don't know who he is, but the hair guy and the Glambot guy are the same thing. Like that is a helpful connection to
Well,
create.
I introduced you to Paul earlier, and Paul's like, "Wait, I know you from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
It's probably the hair." I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I never want to say like, oh yeah, you know me from the internet, but like, it does sort of happen, and I'm just, if I get recognized, it's cool, and if not, like, I don't have any expectations that someone might know who I am. You know what I mean? So.
Sure.
So not to step back too far, but I would love to hear just a little bit about the transition from university to Los Angeles. That's a huge move that a lot of people make, and it's one that is a leap of faith. So how did that sort of
It's interesting because I've had a number of conversations about this specifically, and I think it is definitely different now. The climate, I don't want to talk away from the mic. The climate is very different now because you don't necessarily, it's less important that you need to be in LA in today's world. But when I was starting, it was like the only option was to be in LA. So, I used my 5 years, I did a little slow in university, as like a learning ground for filmmaking. I was just shooting all the time and doing tiny little jobs, like $100 to shoot. I have a background in dance too, so I'd shoot little dance events, I'd shoot people's like demo reels or whatever. And so that was like how I got my start. And then I just sort of, when I realized that I could do that as a career, it sort of was like the only option for me. A lot of people ask like, oh, there's a film industry in Vancouver. Why don't you just stay in Vancouver? And I'm like, well, I want to be a director. So it's like, they don't hire directors in Vancouver. So the only option really was LA. And it was difficult because I had to get a visa and a lawyer and do that whole thing. So it was just like one step at a time. And I just kind of like, it really just boiled down to me being like, if that's what I want to do with my life, I don't want any limitations. I want all the opportunity I can afford myself. So it's like, I have to go to LA.
Yeah.
That's the only
leap of faith.
That's the only way to make it work. Yeah. And it was scary. And there was months where I ate just ramen.
Yeah.
But it's how it works.
Sure.
So how did you realize that's what you wanted to do? So, you're like at one moment you realized it's what you want to do. So what was that moment?
I don't know if there's a specific moment really. It was just kind of like, I don't know. I loved making videos, and I was kind of like, if I can do this for the rest of my life, I will be happy. I guess if I could pinpoint it, there was a number, when I'm in college, or university, as they say up there in Canada, and when I'm in university, people are going out partying, going drinking, and I would find myself Saturday night, like at home editing, trying to make a silly video or a fun music video or whatever. And I remember there was like 3 or 4 Saturdays in a row where I'm like, I'm not going out at all. I would prefer to stay home and work. So I was like, that has to mean something.
It does.
You know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, this is what I choose to do with my free time. Mm-hmm. So like, if I can get paid to do this forever, like I'm good. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And there's a part of that would make me, I obviously still have goals and aspirations, but it's valuable for me to take a step back and go like, oh, you're already doing it. Like I pay my bills, you know what I mean? Like by making videos. So it's like, I think it's important to just go like, this, like I'm kind of living the dream already, you know what I mean? Like
sure.
I want to do more, but like I've gotten something, I'm living that dream that I had in my bedroom in Canada already,
Yeah. I think everybody's goal is to do something that they're passionate about and be compensated for it. And so the fact that you were able to achieve that, especially while you're still in school, that's an amazing story.
I wasn't paying my bills by filmmaking while I was still in school. I was just doing a little gig for $100 here or there.
Yeah. So what was that gig in Los Angeles where you're like, okay, this is real. This is like, I actually have an opportunity now. Or maybe even before that, what was the gig that sort of pushed you in the direction of getting to where you are now?
It's an interesting question because I feel like I never wanted to be too, or I'll put it this way, I dislike it when people are too boastful or like too, like, they talk about it more than being about it. So I was always like afraid of proclaiming like, oh, this is the job where I am now this thing, you know what I mean? So I think that I did a few cool jobs as a director, but I was always kind of like, well, I'm editing more for work than directing, so like I'm still an editor, you know what I mean? But again, it's hard to say if there was one definitive job. I think actually it was like I did these dance videos for Miley Cyrus early on when she was like Hannah Montana in like 2008.
Yeah.
That was like my first time working with celebrities.
Sure.
And I think that was like a thing, and it just was like the right place and time with like how stuff was first going viral. And so it sort of like made a little bit of a splash online. And that was a thing, especially in LA, I could say, and some people would have seen or known about it. So that was kind of cool. Like, I had confidence of being like, oh, like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I did those Miley videos. But, oh, I saw that. So that like gave me a bit of confidence. But then I think when I first started working with Pink, that was a thing where I was like, oh, like, she really gave me a chance. And so it just sort of was that to another level. Like, oh, now I've done some stuff for Miley. I've done some stuff for Pink. And like, this could be a thing that I can keep going with, you know?
So I think that the question I for sure have, and I think a lot of people have, is how do you create those relationships with high-end talent, and how do you continue to build that network in a way that's not just like, oh, I'm like kind of globbing onto you, as if it's like, so they're calling you, not necessarily, you know, you're sort of following them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how you create them.
Yeah.
It's just, it literally is the right place and right time. So I use this a lot as an example. The Pink job I did for free. I offered my services for free to come, not necessarily for Pink, but for my friend who was choreographing for her. So my friend Allison Falk, she was choreographing Pink's tour with this other guy, Leo, and it was a huge job for them. And so they just wanted some rehearsal footage. So they're like, why don't you come shoot for free? Or they're just like, why don't you just come shoot some stuff, and then you can meet people involved. And I was like, great, I'm in 100%. Yeah. So I showed up and I shot for free, and I met Pink and I met the tour director, and we all kind of like had a good vibe, and then they ended up hiring me for like 5 days. They're like, why don't you come film behind the scenes, rehearsals, 5 days, and like, that's it. That thing grew and grew, and then I ended up working for her for like 8 years. But it was because that day I showed up for free, and I've talked about this a bunch with friends, and like, there's pros and cons to free work. I'm not advocating like, oh, go do free work. And usually if people, unless they're your really close friends, like ask you to work for free for exposure, you can tell them to go F off most of the time, you know what I mean? But there is some value in doing free work, and I think that like, I'd be remiss to not mention the importance of it. I still try to do like one music video a year for free / no budget. Like, I don't get paid. Like, if they have $500, let's put $500 on screen and just make something cool and fun, because I still think there's value in that.
Sure.
So, you know, but so really, I was at the right place and right time with Pink. And then it's just like working hard and being good to work with, because then they'll call you back. Like, if I showed up and I was a jerk, she would see me for 5 days and then just be like, all right, cool, like, that was nice working with you, and never talk to you ever again. But I think we like had a good vibe, and I was good to work with, and so they brought me on. Then they asked me to direct the opening video for the tour, and then I did a documentary of her life on the road, and then did behind the scenes for a bunch of her music videos, and I directed some music videos. So it was, you know, like, I don't know how to be at the right place at the right time, but like, when you get there, it's like, if you're working hard, you're good to work with. I do think like kindness goes really far. Yeah. I don't hire jerks, you know what I mean? Yeah, so I think those are bits of the recipe. The other stuff is just like, who knows how that stuff happens.
Well, I think what you're saying for sure makes sense. It's calculated risks. So you don't know that you're in the right place at the right time while it's happening, right?
Oh yeah.
You're calculating a risk of, well, you have an opportunity to work for Pink, and you might not be getting paid, you know, anything, or, you know, it might be a small budget, but there's an opportunity there, and you want to seize that opportunity, right? So I think, especially in this industry, it's you take a calculated risk, but you build that relationship, right? So I think you've mentioned in the past, this is a relationship-based business. I think most people we've had on the podcast so far would agree with that. So tell me a little bit about building those relationships. What's the trick there? Like, what's the secret sauce? Yeah.
Yeah, I still think it's still the same things I mentioned. I think that, like, you know, at a certain level, like, everybody is talented. You know what I mean? There's 20 people that know how to show up with a camera and make somebody look good.
For sure.
Right? But it's like, I do think that it's like, if you're good to work with, if you're punctual, if you run your business like a business, which sort of sounds weird, but like, so many people are so lackadaisical about their work because they're a creator or whatever. They're like, oh, I'm being creative. It's like, it'll happen when it happens. Like, I want you to show up on time, do your job, do it well. And if you can check all those marks, then like, I guess what I'm saying, if you can give me a reason to hire you over the other 20 people, like, you should do that thing.
Makes
and
sense.
if that thing is being nice and kind or funny or personable or whatever, then like, do those things, you know, like, but it's more so just like, be the kind of person that you want to work with. Because when you start working all the time, and like I work with the same people all the time because I love being on set with them. They're my friends and my coworkers, you know?
For sure.
So it's just like, don't be an idiot. Be nice, you know, and like enjoy your time with people. And like I think that's a thing that will let people want to call you to come work, right?
Yeah.
The majority of my work is word of mouth, repeat clients. You know, I have reps, but like 5% max is what they've gotten me.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, I think we had a podcast last week with Kenny McMillan, who is a working, indie filmmaker, and he had the exact same advice where he was saying that he found that he was losing out on jobs because he wasn't the sort of person that people want to be around.
Well, so, that's a revelation.
Totally, and he was like, he had to like look inward and be like, listen, I need to like work on myself to make myself the person that gets hired because they want to be around me. They want to be they want to be with me. They want me to be there, not necessarily because I'm the best for this specific job, but because I can help facilitate the whole production.
Absolutely, yeah,
huge.
Yeah, and I think it's important just to know like where you can add value. You know what I mean? Like I said, there's a ton of people that are talented. A ton of people could technically do the job that you're up against. You know, but if there's anything that you can give in addition to just that, like that's the baseline. You know what I mean? So any other advantage you can give is beneficial.
Well, it is a team sport, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So at what point in your filmmaking career did you go from, shooting skateboard footage on your own to now, having to collaborate with X amount of people, and you realize, like, wow, I don't have full control here, and I need to learn to, play nice and be part of this team?
Yeah, it wasn't, the revelation wasn't really like, oh, I don't have full control. It was more like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. It was like the first thing. Full disclosure, when I did a bunch of stuff for Pink, but it was still like sort of indie scale, like small. Like she didn't have huge budgets for me for the type of content that I was doing. So it was like everybody get together and like do this job the best way we can, right? When I then started working with Katie on her California Dreams tour, that was like, it was the same tour director, so he was bringing me on, this guy Baz Halpin, who's incredible, and that was like a job where we had a proper budget to do like a 3-day shoot doing all the content for her entire concert. So basically, hour and a half show, 7 act breaks. There's like a short film that plays in between each act break, tells a whole story throughout the whole thing, and then there's things, there's costume changes in the video that happen on stage. This huge integrated thing that I ended up writing and directing, which was like a huge opportunity for me. I was very excited about. But we show up on set, and it's like the biggest set. There's like 80 people there, and I'm like, who are all these people? And so it was a lesson for me to like learn how to be confident in my own decisions, because there's a gaffer that's gaffed a ton of music videos and movies that I like aspire to do, and so when it came to make a decision, it was a lesson for me to like be really certain in what I felt and thought. I would defer to a lot of people. I'd be like, well, he'd be like, well, should we do the light here or right there? I'd be like, what do you think? Like, tell me your thought. You know what I mean? But that was like a big thing. So it wasn't like really learning or sort of realizing that I don't have control until I started doing agency work. And the ad agency and the clients start coming over your shoulder about the makeup in the scene. Then I'm like, oh, like you're really trying to direct this thing right now, And that happens a lot. And I think for me in my career, what's been really helpful is learning how to deal with that over the shoulder thing. Because I think it was a thing that sort of maybe happened a little inherently in my personality, perhaps, because often producers would come up and be like, oh, you handled that well, and I was just trying to like diffuse the situation, you know what I mean? But there is a bit of a trick to navigating that dynamic, because it's hard to explain unless you're in it, but it's like creative directors are their own
I think
thing.
we've heard it from like Julia and Kenny. It's on-set politics. Right? And I think with agencies especially, they have a vision they're going for, and they do want a certain amount of control. And, as a director, I assume that's a bit challenging, right?
Yeah, it isn't. It is and it isn't. Like in agency world, it's like often it's their ideas. You know what I mean? And so they're hiring me to do their ideas, so they want to interject. In addition, it's like I've also realized that they just want to have some effect, so that they can go to their bosses and be like, I did this, or I participated, or they just want to be a part of the process.
Politics, man.
Yeah, exactly, right? So there's a sort of like nice way to include them, make them feel a part of it, but then still do what you think is best for the shoot. And it just like, it's always like picking and choosing your battles. You know, I never found, I guess in my research, like talking to people about what makes a good director, nobody was ever like, oh, someone who's like set on their ways and just like plows through everything and like steamrolls the idea through. You're like, that never showed up. It was always someone who was like, listen, it was collaborative and was like, could work with other people well and like understood the schedule limitations and like just worked well under pressure kind of a thing. Yeah. And so I always tried to achieve that. I would never aspire to be like that director that nobody can talk to, that like has this creative savant kind of a guy. That never appealed. Like he just seemed like a jerk. You know what I mean? So I took a different approach in that environment.
All right, so that's kind of covering part one. Unless Avery, you have anything else, or Paul?
Great.
I think part two of my question was, where do you see yourself now? So obviously now you're DGA, right?
Yep.
So you're in the Directors Guild. Where do you see yourself as? Like, what's your current status? Where are you at creatively? How did you develop that look?
So for me, I've been doing short form for a while now. And so the big thing is to just jump into narrative, you know, like it's always been the goal, is to like feature film narrative. And it's kind of interesting because I talk to a lot of people about that, and like TV is the thing that's really popping. And I think that like there's a ton of interesting TV content out there, and like there's really cool opportunities to do really interesting serialized stories. But for me, it just was that's never the thing for me. It's like always like 2-hour, narrative film. That doesn't say I would of course do TV, but it's not, I'm not like really on the grind, like pitching and writing for TV, but I am for features. Like I wake up and I write every day is kind of my schedule. So I try to get that block in before the day gets started and then go do my other things. But really the goal has been trying to transition into long form narrative.
Cool.
Love that. So I'm curious to know, I guess, sort of the marketing side of it. So we're in the Instagram age, we're in the social media sharing age. When did you sort of see that was a decision or a way that you had to go, really jumping into actually marketing yourself through a free medium like Instagram or Twitter?
It was 2017. I started doing the Glambot in 2016. For the Emmys, and then hired this.
Tell us about the Glambot. What is that?
The Glambot is a high-speed motion control camera that we use on red carpet events. So we do the Emmys, Golden Globes, Grammys, and Oscars. Nice. And so it's like this booth that's run by Glambot is an name, and so it's this robotic arm that moves 20 feet in 1.1 seconds, and we shoot with a Phantom, and so we shoot 1,000 frames a second. It whips across space very quickly, and you get this really cool slow-mo glamorous effect. And I think it's just an interesting way to see big name talent on the red carpet that people aren't used to seeing. We just see people standing there taking pictures, and like that's great. But this is like a cool,
candid sort of look into their personality almost, right?
It's an elevated look and just a cool piece of media that people love seeing. So they started doing that, I think, in 2015. They had Joseph Kahn direct the first year. They asked me to direct the second year. But in that, when I first came on, they were like pairing me with other directors to try to, have it work better or something. I don't know what they're trying to do. It's a marketing thing again, right? And so for the Grammys, they hired this guy, Nigel Barker. It's like a fashion photographer who was doing America's Next Top Model. And so we did the Grammys together. And so usually, like back then, Instagram was like fun, and I would post, and I would try to like do things to like make it work, but still figuring it out. And he had a pretty big following back then. And so when we did that job, I looked at his Instagram, and he had like post after post after post on the Glambot. And I looked at mine, and I had one post. And I was kind of like, this guy's got like 200,000 followers. I have like 5,000 at that time. And I was just kind of like, if you were not on that one day I posted, you would have no idea I did this job. And like, meanwhile, it's like a big job for me, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I have no presence on it. And I saw what he was doing, and I saw how he was approaching his socials, and I was like, okay, like, I didn't want to post too much because I wouldn't want to annoy people, but I was like, oh, I don't care. Like, from now on, if I do a job, like, you're gonna know about it on socials. And so that was like the first step.
Well, how many people are doing those jobs, you know?
What do you mean? Like
there's not a lot of people doing those jobs, so you should be posting.
well, yeah, for the GlamBot, yeah, of course. But I was just like any job I do, you know, because I would always just like post once. It's like I do a music video, I spend 2 weeks prep, we shoot, I do 2 weeks post, and then I do one post on it.
Yeah.
And you're just like, if you're not on that day, you didn't even know. I spent a month of my life working on this thing, and then so now I just take a totally different approach. I'm like, if I do a job, like you're gonna know about it. And so that was like one thing. And the second thing was like, I don't look at it like it's not personal anymore. You know what I mean? Like if I want to stay in touch, I think it's good to keep in touch with your friends on there, and I definitely do. But I'm like, I'm posting for work. Yeah. I'm like, I have a job next week. I know what the 3 posts are before. I know what the post is on the day of. You know, I make a plan, and I'm like, this is now the new annoying thing you have to do, like to elevate your career.
For sure.
Because when I first moved to LA, you know, like before social was a thing, I would meet creative people and talented people, and they're like, oh, I love making stuff, but I hate networking. I hate going to parties. I hate like shaking hands.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that seems dumb, but okay, like I get it. I don't really like it either, but I'm gonna find a way to enjoy it. And this is just the new version of that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like you have to self-promote. You have to put your work out there. You have to like share aspects of what you're doing, especially for us. If we look at ourselves like creators, like what are you creating? Yeah. Like make something, you know what I mean? And share it.
Well, I think that it's also because we live in the day and age where there's so much stuff. I mean, you can go on Netflix and see 10 new shows in, you know, a day almost.
Yeah.
And so if you want to, I mean, not that I've never seen your commercials, but I don't know if I've ever seen a commercial you've done, but I know that you do them because you're social.
Yeah.
And that's like, that's part of your portfolio. It's part of your creative process when we don't have, not everyone has the time to see everything that you've done.
Yeah, I mean, that is an issue too. There is too much stuff out there. So for me, advocating to like put more stuff out there, you know, that's a bit in conflict. But like, who cares?
Well,
you know?
I would say I actually know people that post, and they have a good following, and they do a good job of posting, but it's not like the follow through. So you have a formula. You're saying there's, you know, 2 posts leading up to, there's a post the day of, and then a couple follow-up posts, right? To kind of, you're building the audience, you deliver, and then you follow through with what it is that you created, right? I know people that are posting, they have a following, but it's like, okay, so what are they working on? Cool. They have an Alexa Mini. That's awesome, right? They got this whole rig. That's great. What did you create with that?
Yeah.
You know, so it is a little more strategy behind it, and I think just engaging with your folks. Your folks want to see the full story.
Yeah, well, I thought about that a lot because, you know, when I was really trying to figure out how to capitalize on social, I do a lot of things. You know, I have this cool truck. I go on camping trips. I'm also a director. I do some photography. I like working. I do all these other things. I work with like Pink. You know, so it's like, I was like, how do I do all of this cohesively? It all seems so random, you know what I mean? And like I would post a picture of Pink, and then it's like I get a ton of likes, and then I post a picture of like me doing some random thing, and I get no likes. I'm like, well, I should just post pictures of her then, you know what I mean? But
not a bad strategy.
Yeah, but like, and people do that, you know. It's like if you have a thing, if you know, I know people that own, you know, like nice cameras, like cool Airy rigs, and like their whole thing is just their cool rigs, and like that's great, like because people like that. But for me, I was really trying to figure out like how to capture what I am and who I am, you know what I mean? Because I was getting advice, people were like, oh, you should just start a Instagram for your photography, or like just a work one where all your work is on. And I was like, that sounds like too much work, really. And so I sort of settled on the idea, I wanted to be able to post all of it, but I wanted to make sure it didn't feel random. So what I landed on was like the idea of my Instagram, and it's like a curated thing. Like I am that, but I think about what I'm putting out there, you know what I mean? So it's like the idea is like me as a director that's like sort of like a cool guy director, you know, that does fun things and is creative. So like if I can fit a post into that world, then everything should be cohesive behind it. Because then if like I'm making something, if I'm doing a GlamBot, like that's me doing the GlamBot. If I'm like on some camping adventure, that's me taking a cool photo on a camping adventure. So it's like, it took me a while, to be honest, to figure out just that, which kind of, it makes sense in hindsight, but I didn't know how to like position myself at first. And I think that's important because it's the narrative that engages people. You just see a camera, you're like, okay, like, or you see even just a person, and you're like, if I don't know your story, I don't really care. But it's like, if it's a selfie and there's a story behind it, I get what you're doing in your life. I'm like, yeah, like I like that and that guy and what he's doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it
That's
helps.
so true. I mean, I now that I see it, it's marketing. It's what it comes down to.
100%.
Is it's not, but it's for you. It's not disingenuous, which I think is. I mean, I don't know you super well. I've met you a couple times, but I can tell that you're an adventurer. You like to go out. You like to do stuff. You're obviously a director. You do, the glam bot. You do your commercials, and so putting all those things into one. It's bringing all those audiences into one.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know a lot of people who have their photography Instagram, their director, whatever it is, but that's segmenting. It's segmenting everything away from what the actual person is. Like that is you. That even though it's a kind of not wall, but like you're putting yourself out as this specific person, and like maybe that isn't 100% you, but it is you. That's your personality. That's your
brand. That's you.
I never do anything that isn't me per se, and I really try not to filter. It's like I've always just like turned on the story and just like said dumb stuff and done dumb things, and like I just don't care, you know what I mean? And I'm like, if you find that fun, then cool. Often like I do stuff and I'll watch, I'm like, oh, that makes me laugh, so like that's good, I'll send it. And even if I'm acting like an idiot, like I don't really care. So I do try to keep it like, try not to filter as much, you know what I mean? What was your second?
I mean, it's marketing. It creates a personality, but it's also like that's your portfolio. That's who you are. That's what people see of you, and that's what they want to have you do.
Oh yeah. So actually, this is what I'm gonna say. So as far as a personality, like a part of the reason why that's the thing that I'm pushing forward was because I sort of looked at what Instagram was doing, what social was doing, and I looked to the future kind of. I was like, okay, where is this gonna end up? Where is this gonna go? Is it gonna be with just someone that has a sweet directing page or a sweet photography page? And I started looking at like, well, who's popping on Instagram today? And so, back then, 2017, it was like a lot of like influencers were just like popping off, and I was like, you see them sometimes, you're like, what do you even do? Like, you don't do anything, you know what I mean? And so I was like, okay, if someone who like does nothing can like become popular, like I should be able to figure that out. Like, let me do that, and my work, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I really have tried to like encompass both of those things with like, well, I boiled down like, you do nothing. It's like they have a fun personality. Like whatever they're doing, it's like fun and engaging, and like you like them as a person, you know what I mean? Like, so I tried to take that approach with my work to do like both sides. Like, let me do the really cool directing stuff, like the work related stuff. Let me do this fun, charismatic personality stuff. And now I think it's really useful because I think when like clients and stuff everybody, that's the other thing, like talking to agency people and like the people who hire production companies and directors, they're all on Instagram all day, like on set. They're just sitting there like not even paying attention to the job they're on. Just like I'm like, what? You guys are just on Instagram all day. So like they're looking, like they're engaged, and like they all want poppin' socials too. You know what I mean? So it's like if you can, it's just like it helps now because if they're like, oh, here's this director, they immediately get a sense of my work, my personality, my work ethic, my aesthetic, all that stuff just by going on Instagram. Whereas before, it's like you go to someone's website, you watch someone's reel. It's like you don't know, like, are they nice? Are they fun? You have no idea. So you get everything in 2 seconds. Like I can look at anybody's social and be like, get an idea, even if it's not like I get an idea from anybody's social.
Well, and then who in today's day and age is actually going through the trouble of checking your portfolio site? It's like you have to take an extra step, right? If you're on Instagram, you're there already. You're
it's like I know where to find stuff. It's like you go to someone's website, you're like, where's their reel? Like I don't understand. It's like got all these like opening tab things. You're like, I don't know. It's like too much of a hassle. I don't even bother.
Sure.
I noticed it too when I was actually doing the glam bot and I was deciding like who to include in my reels, and like I didn't know half the talent that was coming in because I don't watch TV, say on the Emmys, right? So all these people are coming in. I'm like, I don't know who this person is really. I would just go to their Instagram and like look at how many followers they had, and like it's dumb, but I'm like,
that's not dumb at all.
But I'm like, here's this person with 8 million followers, like I should probably cut them into this reel, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that even for me, I was like subconsciously noticing that, and I was like, okay, well this means more than going to like their IMDb and like looking at. It was just easier too, like. Because if they have 8 million, they're probably on a hit show. Like, does it matter to me which? I don't care what show they're on. Like, you're going in the reel, on to the next. You know what I mean?
So have you, with so many brands and so many people looking at social. Have you found that to be a successful marketing tool for your actual career as well? Has anyone found you through social?
Yeah. When Warner Brothers slides in your DMs, I think you know you're doing it right. So it goes
down in the DMs.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is the Glambot stuff because that is the thing that has really like popped on social. But like Paramount's reached out, Warner Brothers reached out, and they want to do Glambot stuff for their premieres. Stuff hasn't actualized yet, but still, it's just like it's a fascinating thing. As soon as I put a little bit of effort into like really looking at Instagram like work and like really having a proper representation of myself on there, I get immediate feedback. It's quite astonishing, to be honest. Because it's so instant. It's like, let me put out 3 or 4 posts like one week that are really like poignant to my career, and then people see it, and then the next week I get a message. So it's like it's instantaneous feedback.
So you mentioned you have your aesthetic feel on Instagram, right? So what is that, and how did you develop that?
I think it's just a thing that organically came about. I didn't like pick a look. I sort of never wanted to dictate my style, and even in my directing, like I think that like early in my career,
a director that doesn't direct his style. That's what you're saying.
Well, I never wanted to like pick what my style was. It's like you'd see like, oh, Quentin Tarantino always has the trunk shot. You know what I mean? And you're like, I want a shot like that, but I didn't want to like pick what that was and then just force it into my stuff. So I took like the long route of going like, okay, I'm not going to decide what my aesthetic should be or what I cognitively want it to be. I'm going to let it just develop. And I was like, I'm just going to keep shooting stuff that I like, keep shooting stuff that I think is pretty. And I was like, at some point, I think it'll cohesively feel like a thing that I did. And in the first couple reels, I was like, that doesn't really have a style, feels a little random. But I think, further off in my career, someone saw it and was like, oh, you have a really good sense of style. And I'd watch it like, there's a bit of a continuity in like what I'm doing. And so I just let it develop. And the same thing with Instagram. I wasn't like, oh, let me like make all my shadows teal and like have this like visual aesthetic. I'm just kind of like, there's stuff that I think looks cool and that I like, and I think that a style will come out from that. And if it's a bit random, it's a bit random.
Yeah.
But it has personality. So
what was the style?
Oh, I mean, I don't even know if I can really describe it because it's just like literally with every photo, I'm just kind of like, this is pretty. I'm gonna put it out there. You know what I mean? I don't know. I use split toning a lot in Lightroom, so I do that. I have golden highlights. I do that a lot, if I had to say. But I mean, I don't know if I could articulate my style really.
Well, that's fair enough.
It's consistent though, so it's consistency with that. Even if it's not something that you would necessarily be able to pinpoint, you can look through your feed and it's visually pleasing, even from like the view of not clicking, like the tiled view. You can tell that it's curated. It's a piece that's not necessarily just kind of hodgepodge, like, oh, this is something I did, this is something I did.
Yeah. And I think even though I might not be able to articulate what the style is, I do know what it's not, because I'm like, oh, I'm going to put this up, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't fit, that doesn't work at all, and I'm not going to do it, you know what I mean? So I have some internal guidance, but I don't know. I don't know how I just can't articulate it. I don't know. Yeah.
So one of the questions that we always ask is, what are those pieces of equipment, not even necessarily equipment, what are those 5 things that you always have on you that are like the most important things in your career or in your life, honestly?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, iPhone 10 for sure. It's so interesting because as I'm like making more content and like, I went camping recently and I vlogged the whole thing. I had like GoPro and like I shoot on Sony when I'm like running around. The iPhone like takes the best for it. It's the best for it. It is good audio, like great dynamic range. I know, but I mean, it's like, and it's just always in my pocket, right? And so I have like a GoPro on like a Gorilla Pod, but it's like this thing doesn't fit in your pocket. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it's amazing though, because that is the way things are going. It's who has the time and energy to pack up a camera, for every given situation, right? But if you go to the theme park, if you go to the mall, whatever it is, you have a camera in your pocket now, right?
Yeah,
and it's an incredible time to live.
It's a great camera. And I think just recently in the past couple years, phones in general have superseded like pocket cameras, but because for a while they just weren't quite up to par, but now they're better. So it's like,
for sure.
I mean, that's the thing that I always have. I don't know, on set, my trifold. My gold fold trifold, always have that on set, keep organized.
Cool. We love the gold folds.
Yeah, totally. I don't know. I mean, I work on a Mac all day long, every day. So that iCal, I put everything in my iCal. That's a big tip, actually. I have like color-coded thing. And when you look at that week, it's like, it's full.
Okay.
I put like I put everything in there. Because I just don't like to remember. I don't like to leave it up to my memory, even though if I put it in and like put it in and think about it, I'd remember it. But I know if I don't put it in, I'm not remembering it. So that's the thing I use all the time.
It's a great tool. I mean, why not? You know, especially when it's syncing from your desktop to your phone and everything else. I mean, it's
keeping organized. I mean, I think the business aspect is so important. You know what I mean? It is about being creative. It is about making cool stuff. It is about like, just putting out art. But it's like, it's a business, And I think you can. The way I realize it, I would look at people that I know, and like, not to be too judgmental, but I'd see someone who I thought was like not so talented, right? Be really successful because like they were on the business side. And then I'd see someone who's like a dope artist, like super creative, like far beyond me, but just like doesn't give a crap about business or like doesn't know how to do it or doesn't care or just thinks themselves as an artist and they like are not working.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, who do I want to be? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to like make any claims of like how inherently talented I am, but like the business thing, I can do that. That's the thing I can learn and I can do.
Hard work pays off.
Yeah, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? So staying organized, I think, is one of them.
So that's 3 things, right?
Mm-hmm. You say maybe coffee? I feel like
coffee is
a big part of your
definitely coffee, which is interesting. For being like, I really started directing in like 2008, 2009. I think I had my first cup of coffee in 2016.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like I'm old.
Life-changing.
And I had my first cup of hot coffee. I had arguments about this because I've had frappuccinos. People are like, well, you've had coffee. And I'm like, that doesn't really count. But like a hot cup of coffee, not till I was, 2016. So, but now it's like I'm obsessed and it's annoying but fun.
You have a special brew you like?
Yeah, I mean, I started getting into espresso, and so I bought like a little cheap home machine that I made coffee with. I mean, cheap is super relative. It was still expensive.
Yeah, for sure.
But I had that for like a year, and then I bought like some fancy Italian machine that I make coffee with every morning.
Nice.
And it's the best.
All right.
Love it. You owe us one more, I think.
Thing I use every day. I don't think this is. Thing I use lately. It's not a thing, but like I've lately gotten into meditation.
Okay.
And it's been interesting. I've always sort of felt of myself as being like a generally calm, at peace kind of person, and I do think I am. But I don't know. I just have found it like a valuable tool. I did this 30-day meditation thing with this guy, Matt Davila, who has a great podcast as well. He makes a ton of interesting content, and so he did a 30-day meditation thing. And I was like, I'm going to do that too, because I've always been like interested about it. And this is just like last month. So this is
30-day meditation.
Yeah, every day, 30 days. So he did an hour. I did 10 minutes. You know.
Okay, all right.
But I found it just so helpful, and it's been really beneficial. And so now I try to do 10 minutes when I wake up and 10 minutes before I go to bed. I sleep better. I just like helps me focus. And so it's become an interesting tool in my life that's free. Well, the app that I use is expensive, but
Yeah. So I think we want to jump into some Q&A, but quickly, I'm curious. So you're getting into the narrative, and you want to get to narrative. Mm-hmm. What genre? What are you like interested in writing?
So it's an interesting question because my body of work, like I want to be pragmatic about making this jump, because it's like you're in a catch-22. I have never directed a feature, so no one wants to let you direct a feature. So it's like you're always in that position. Everybody's always in that position. It's like if you've done like commercials or like little short form things and you want to do a music video, you're like, well, you haven't done one before. You're like, well, how does anyone do one? You're like, everybody has to do their first thing, right?
For
sure. But I understand that like my body of work speaks to a certain aesthetic and style. It's bright, it's high key, it's fun. There's some comedy, there's a ton of movement. So that type of thing would be in my best interest to put forward as my first feature. If I write a script for like a dark thriller, I'm going to look at like Katy Perry in like a rainbow suit and be like, wow, I don't really see how this is going to work. You know what I mean? I think that like those types of films do interest me, but like I said, I'm trying to be pragmatic about getting my first feature under my belt. So I think something that's like fun, like comedically driven, and like even like female lead empowered, I think could be a thing that would work well for me, because I have a lot of like strong females on my reel.
Hey man, listen, at some point someone got in the room and decided to make a movie about tornadoes and sharks, and that worked for them.
Yeah. This is true. This is true.
Right? So I think just getting that break and capitalizing on it is important for sure.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, we have a microphone set up right here. If anyone has a question, please feel free to come up this way and ask away.
Hey, Cole, Frank Lozano. Thanks for doing this. When it comes to your social, you said earlier that you don't necessarily curate and say, I want this color palette or whatever. So I kind of get that, but I noticed that you don't use a lot of hashtags or any hashtags really.
Okay, sure, yeah.
And then I've always heard about engagement. I don't really feel like you engage a lot, but yeah, obviously you got a ton of followers. And then my last question is, do you schedule like, okay, I got to do 5 posts a week, or is it just when you're doing projects? I mean, how do you figure that out?
Sure. So as far as the hashtag thing, I do hashtag. I just put it in the comments off of the caption, so like it just gets hidden and then it goes further to the bottom and then people don't really see it. So that's a thing. Sometimes I'll have a couple just in there that I think are funny or poignant or whatever, but I'll do a chunk every time, and I just have a text note in my phone with like different kind of like categories, I guess. I just like copy and paste it on. So I do that. The engagement, it's been a little difficult. I mean, this is like champagne problems, like having a bigger following, like you can't answer everybody, but I definitely try to the best I can. So I'll just scroll through and I'll just reply on comments as much as I can. And then what was your third?
Schedule.
Oh, scheduling, yeah. So I mean, my goal is to post every day. That is my goal. I don't always do it, and now it's a little tricky because every second post or every third post is a Glambot post, and those take like an hour to cut. And so I always tell myself, like, okay, like sit down, like spend 4 hours, cut a couple of them so you have them, and that never happens. So it's like in the morning, I'm like, oh, geez, okay, I got this much time, like let me try to cut one real quick. So yeah, I think for me, it's really just trying to post every day. And it's annoying. Today, I was just like scrolling through stuff like, oh God, I don't want to post any of this stuff. It's annoying, but I was like, I literally almost walked away like 3 or 4 times. And I was like, no, this is a part of your work. You just sit here and you figure it out and just post anything, even if it was like not, I think it's better to post. I mean, you obviously have to use your own discretion, but I think it's better to post and like keep on people's timeline to keep in their mind of like you're doing something, you're working, than to not. So like if you're looking at your stuff, you're like, I don't really like any of these things. Like just throw one up. It's gone tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, because if you throw 5 photos up and even if you don't really like them, it's like people see it and they're like, oh, you're doing stuff. What, you know, it's like this guy. Maybe it's like like I only call people that are like I've talked to in the last like 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Like if someone's like, hey, I'm down for your project 3 months ago, like I don't remember when the time comes. So it's like staying fresh in people's memory is important. And so that's why I think it's advantageous just to stay active on the feed.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have a follow-up pro tip. You mentioned how you copy and paste with your notes. You know, on the phones, you can do a text replacement. And so I have like categories like you. And so I'll do like just initials, BTS, and then I have the text replacement where it loads all the hashtags instantaneously.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So you don't have to type it out every time or copy and paste.
That's a good idea.
It's just as text replacement.
Yeah,
Pro tip.
I actually, there. I'm learning tips. Yeah. I should do that. I had that for a driving one where I was like driving. I would put 2 things and I'd be like, hey, I'm driving. Yeah. But this seems much more effective for me.
For sure. Cool.
Hey, first of all, thanks for sharing your story. I really appreciate the insight. My question is regarding moments of self-doubt throughout your career, if you've ever experienced it, and if so, how do you tackle that, and if you have any advice on that kind of stuff?
Sure, yeah. Let's be honest about it every day. You know what I mean? Like, I think that it's really important to remember that, like, everybody that you are inspired by or you look up to, like, we all have the same feelings about self-doubt. You know what I mean? It's like, you ask those same, everybody asks the same questions, like, can I do it? Am I good enough? Am I talented enough? You know what I mean? And like, the thing that I realized was like, those thoughts are never beneficial to you. They make you not work. They make you not move forward. And so I always just tried to, like, the best I could, just have it not impede my work. You know what I mean? Like, I just tried to be like, okay, I understand that those happen, and like, if I give into it, it just is not helpful, right? Other than that, I mean, I don't really know, like, it happens. I don't know. I think that, like, the other thing that I realized that, like, you know, with like motivation and inspiration and stuff, which often, like, coincides with self-doubt, you feel like unmotivated, uninspired, and like, and you start doubting yourself, obviously, is that like action is often the answer. You know what I mean? And even in like sitting down and like working, you know, I sometimes I feel super not in the mood, I don't want to do it. I'm just like grumpy about working because I have so much work, or because I'm stressed out, or because I'm like doubting what I can accomplish. And just getting some momentum doing. So it's like action. It's not inspiration, like, oh, I'll work on this when I'm inspired. It's literally action and work. So like you just force yourself to do something, and then you get the momentum going. Then you start feeling good about yourself because you're like, oh, I'm doing something now. And like those little tricks to just help you get out of a funk, I think are helpful. But I also think too, it's like if you're feeling down, it's like to let yourself go through that. I think that like shutting it out completely also isn't necessarily helpful. If you're feeling kind of in the gutter, like let yourself mope around for a day, 2 days or whatever, as long as it's not getting too long, then just let yourself feel those things, you know?
Would you say that helps you stay humble as well? And that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hi. So I have 3 questions. One is on the business side. So when you are approaching now bigger clients, you don't know the pricing of things, and you don't know what to price yourself, and you're scared of either pricing yourself too high or too low. And sometimes when you price yourself too low, people think like, oh, he probably isn't that good, or, you know, so what's the right way to approach business on as pricing and budgeting, and what's your take on that?
Always go high. Very simple. Always go high. So I think that like I always go high. I have like a book rate and be like, hey, I want you to do this thing. I'm like, here's my book rate, but I always add, hey, this sounds really cool. I'm really into it. If this doesn't work, let me know what does work, and like let's work it out because I want to do this job. But this is my rate, and I think nobody's gonna like. Nobody wants to be like, oh, you're not worth that. You know what I mean? You definitely can scare people away, you know, but then it's like, if they don't want to pay your rates, it really just depends on where you're at in your career. Like, I don't need to take I'm fortunate enough I don't need to take every job, but I also like want to work. And so I do have the same concerns of like pricing myself out, you know what I mean? But I think that like you always start high and just tell them that you want to do the job and you are willing to work with them. And then often they'll just tell you how much they have. And it goes for any scale, you know what I mean? If your rate's like $1,000 to show up and they have like $650, you know, like maybe you're like, oh, should I come at like 500 because I did some other jobs for 500? It's like, then you're giving them a deal. Because you're like, oh, 500, I guess. And they're like, oh, we had 650. Like, we're saving money. But if you come in at 1,000 and you're like confident about it, but we're like, oh, I want to work with you. But like, well, we only have 650. And you're like, great, I'll do it. You know what I mean?
There you go.
So like, it really puts you in the position to find out, because even for me, it's like, I don't know how much they have, you know what I mean? Like, but we all want to maximize what that is. Yeah. So I say come in high and like, just be willing to work with them. And then once you figure out what they really have, then you can decide on doing it. But it's like, I hate coming in low and trying to like figure out where their ceiling is, because that just sucks.
Right. Now, on that, if you're just, let's say you're just starting out, and you know you have the talent, and you do have the gear and the talent to produce, you know, awesome things. And so what's the average pricing once you're dealing with like a little bit higher end businesses, like you know, good name brand car dealerships, or other, you know, other type of businesses where they, you know, they have a little bit more money? What's the average? I know nothing's definitive, but the average
sure.
price.
I wish I could be more insightful on that, just because it's changed so dramatically, like since I was doing those types of gigs, and so I literally have no idea. I would say like 500 to 5,000 is where you know what I mean? Like, it's so hard to say, unfortunately, but that's why it's like, I don't know. But I think like, from what it sounds like, it's like the more you work, just like the more you understand like how much you can get with people, and the more you negotiate with people, like the better you are at it. That's another thing too. Like, people used to always tell me like, oh, I hate negotiating, and I used to hate negotiating too. But I was always like, well, I want to earn money, so like let me be good at this. You know what I mean? And I would go into negotiations like early, and I would just get not taken advantage of, but they would run the meeting. You know, I'd be like, oh, okay, like I'll do the job. Like, I don't know. So and I was like, well, I know that you can be so good that like you run the show when you're talking. Let me figure that out. Let me figure out how to be that assertive and direct and understand like where my value is, so I can then ask for and demand for whatever I want. And I think the trick is like, you're not necessarily, I don't think that you're worth your rate, you're worth the value to them. So like, your rate is the value you give them. It's just a different way of thinking about it. But like, so say for shooting stuff like with Katie, right? So that inherently has some value, because it's a risk. If they go like for someone else, like they don't know if Katie's gonna get along with the other person. They don't know like if they're gonna make her look pretty. And so it's like, they have confidence in me, and that's where I add value. So that's the thing I'm getting paid for. It's not like because I have gear and because I have experience, or, I mean, I guess experience, right? But it's like, my rate is their value. And so I think you have to look at it like that. Like for a car dealership, what is their value? Like what dollar amount is it worth to them? Not what you charge necessarily, right? It's just a different way of thinking about it, but I think it can help you bring your rates up a little bit.
Well, that's very insightful.
And, well, last thing. Now, when you're posting on Instagram, you use Instagram purposely now. Now it's not just some random thing anymore. We live in an age where image is important now. And so when you make posts, and you make posts of, you're always going to have some projects that are like small, that you do for, for friends for free and stuff like that. And are you choosing the projects, like you don't post like the low part projects, you post the ones that look fun?
No,
and stuff
post
like that?
everything, man. If you're out there making stuff, if you're working as a filmmaker, even if you're working for free, you're making stuff, and that's your value. You're a creator that is creating, right? So it's like, it doesn't like, sure, bigger clients are cooler, right? But like, if you're on set doing something, I used to be a little apprehensive about like showing me on set with like a DSLR, because I'm like, oh, I'm a filmmaker that uses big cameras, and I'm like, that's stupid. You know what I mean? Like, I'm out there making something. It doesn't matter anymore like the size of this or that. It's like, especially on social, like people like that you're making stuff. So like, just show them you making stuff.
Yeah. So. Last one, I promise. Well, now, when you approach, like, let's say you want to do a project, you want to start doing this type of thing, obviously you have to have something done so people get interested and they say, okay, you can do this. Now, if you're trying to chase a project that you can shoot, but you haven't shot yet, and you don't want to be annoying to the person, but you want to really do that project, how would you go about it to start, getting into it?
I mean, they have to want you to do it, you know what I mean? So it's like, you have to just show them that you can with whatever body of work you have, like put it out there and like just move on. Because I think that like, if you keep, like, check back in, but if you hound them, you seem desperate and they're like, that guy's not working. People want to work with people who are working, and that's a part of the reason why my advice is like post all the time. Even in the upper levels of Hollywood, people only want to work with other people who are currently working with other people. So it's so stupid, but like that's how it works. And so it's like, you can elicit that same kind of thing if you're showing your work or you're working a lot. And if you're busy, like, and you're doing cool stuff, they're like, oh, this guy's busy, he's always working, like we should call him and get him in here, because it's like, maybe he won't be available, maybe he's doing bigger stuff, you know what I mean? So it's all about like presenting yourself in that way. And so it's not like, don't fake jobs like you're working when you're not, but post every single thing you're doing, because you're out there making stuff, right?
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Cool. Well, I want to thank the audience again for coming out. Oh, we have one more question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg once spoke to the fact that as a director, you have to, I don't want to call it an illusion, but you have to like show that you know what you're doing. And I'm curious, as a director, has there ever been a point where you, I don't want to like assume anything of you, but
Sure.
you kind of maybe didn't know what you're doing in some situation, and you had to like put up an illusion that you knew what you were doing. And in accordance to that, what challenges have you faced in directing? How did you solve them?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I already admitted, the Katie job, for sure. So, like, I never really knew that much about lighting. And I think it's not so much like, I think that's phrased a little not quite right, where it's not like, you don't want to present that you know something that you don't, right? But in that case in particular, like I said, I would just defer to other people or seek their advice. So I would never go, I don't know what to do, you know what I mean? I would just be like, what do you think? Maybe we should try this, or like, what's your thought, And so I think the front is like being composed and keeping your composure. That's the utmost importance. Like if you have a director who doesn't have composure and doesn't have it together, like the entire thing falls apart, right? And so, but make no assumptions. I don't know everything, you know what I mean? And I think that anybody on any job, even Spielberg, it's like he doesn't know everything. You know, it's like sure he has plenty of experience, but like there's moments where he's probably like, I don't know, what should we do? You know what I mean? Or like he hasn't worked with a bit of technology or shot in a certain area that like he doesn't really know. And a big part of the job, a huge part of directing is figuring it out on set. You know, and so I think the front that you're referring to is more keeping your composure and not just like admitting, like, I don't know, it's like not admitting that you don't know how to do something like bad. I don't know, I just feel like you just want to keep your composure. And so if you don't know something, like ask, there's other people there. And if you still can't get an answer, like just make a decision. Because the other thing that like, besides like a non-composed director running around like, their head's cut off, you know, is like a director who's indecisive. That's also hugely problematic. You're far better off just to like make a decision if you can't decide and just roll with it. And then maybe the front is like acting like that's what you really wanted to do when you didn't really know. Yeah. But yeah, just composure I think is super important on set.
What's up, Cole? My name's Mitchell. My brother here, Nibbles, he really looks up to you, and he decided to come out today and film you. But what we love about you is that we lost our mom to cancer 8 years ago, and that you spoil your mom. So it's so awesome that you do that, bro. So keep on doing that. But I also vlog. I'm a wedding MC. I just got my 360 1X today, so I'm really excited. But I guess I'm kind of blacking out here. I forgot what I was going to say, guys. Oh, my God.
Thank you for the kind words.
Oh, no, but no, thank you, bro. Go ahead. You had a question. What conditioner do you use? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I could definitely answer and talk about that.
That's number 6 on the list, right, Maiji? My question is, when you do the glam bots, it is do or die, especially like, for example, if you did the most recent Met Gala, for example, if you were there on the red carpet, you can only imagine how cumbersome some of the outfits are.
Oh, yeah.
You know the limits as soon as they walk up to you, and I watch you how you already, what's your creative decision when you have like a 0.5 seconds when their manager or whatever pulls them to you, and you see, oh, she has a nice tail, or her hair is something, and you say, okay, do a little movement, small becomes big, or what have you. 2-part question, what's your creative split hair? What happens at that moment? And when has something gone wrong? You have to swallow that L and learn from it. And how do you deal with it?
2 good questions. So to answer the first one, that job, like the Glambot, is so much about like assessing exactly what you can do in that 0.5 seconds of like the person walking up, because the environment is so frenetic. I've had people like, I've given them all the direction, we're ready to push start, and then the publicist is like, no, they gotta go, and they just like pull them off the thing. So I don't know what kind of tip I can give for that, but it's just about being really just observant of like what their attitude is, what they're wearing. Like obviously just, looking at their outfit, like, okay, well, this is a cool thing. And I think for the Glambot, if I can get them to do one cool thing, that will make the whole thing shine. So whether it's like throwing the dress or a little turn or even just a little look, if they can like really sell one thing, then it looks good for me. But a huge part of it is assessing what talent is willing and not willing to do. And I think that environment is like a microcosm for all sets. Like if you're working with an actor for 3 hours, you're assessing like what their attitude, their vibe is, and what they're willing to do and not willing to do, when they're gonna get tired, when they're gonna get like frustrated, when they're gonna, feel however they're gonna feel. It's really important for you as a director to be able to be in tune with that and then adjust accordingly. And I think I developed that quite a bit, working with that kind of level talent, like with Pink and Katy Perry and stuff. When they're over it, like you can see it a little bit, you know what I mean? And so trying to be in tune with that is really helpful. And then as far as taking the L, like it's definitely happened. I've screwed up jobs, and the only thing you can do is own up to it. Is 100% own up to it and be like, I messed this up, this is my bad, you know what I mean? Because the thing, like, I haven't held grudges, but like people have screwed up and they don't admit it, and they try to like defer or like say it's this or that, and I'm like, I know this was you, and I'm like, I'm thinking about it, like I don't work with them anymore. I'm like, I can't, like if you mess up, that's not that big of a deal. I mean, depending on how big the mess up is, but like everybody screws up. So if you can come to me and be like, yo, I screwed this up, like my bad, and like just that's it, I'm like, great. Like you messing up is not a problem. You blaming someone else, you not owning up to it, you trying to hide that fact, that's a problem. I don't want to work with that person. The person that owns up to it and like comes up and is honest about it, I'll keep working with you.
Hey man, I remember 20-second pep talk for the people out there. So my brother had a chance to go on tour with Trevor Noah for like his comedy special. But the thing is, whether it was self-belief or equipment, he didn't have the right lens. What's your advice to people who get a gig opportunity and they don't feel prepared and they don't take it, or should they take it?
Oh, always take it. Always
Do
take
it, bro.
Is it still up? Can you still do it?
Oh yeah.
Well, why are you not doing it?
This was 2-3 years ago and you still take it.
Oh, okay.
Well,
So
it should never be
so-
up to
so-
you, right?
I'm sorry, bro.
Yeah, no. I mean, so look, I mean, I get it. Like, if you know, there's definitely times where it's like you don't have the right gear, and it's just like it's not feasible for you to just to go out and spend $5,000 and buy all the gear. But I think it's like I never try to say no to work, because work procures work. You know, you go and do that job and your one crappy kit lens you have or whatever, it's like you'll meet someone and like you'll get some good shots, you know what I mean? So always say yes. Just because work procures more work. So there's no version where you say no because you don't think you're ready. Like if they're asking you, they think you're ready. If you're not confident, they're confident. Like just believe what they believe, you know what I mean? And just try to hide it. Like, so yeah, always do the work and just do as good a job as you can. And it's like, it's just gonna be what it's gonna be. Because there's also the opposite of that. There's no time where you get hired and everything is ready and everything is perfect. Like, that never happens, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so like,
for sure.
you just have to roll with it.
Cool. Well, so again, want to thank everybody for coming out. Really want to thank Ari Miller and
Panasonic.
I'm sorry, I was blanking on that. And Moviola and Filmtools for hosting this. Really want to thank you for coming out. And on behalf of Paul, Avery, and Cole, this is Joe. Filmtools Podcast. Tune in next week. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you guys for coming out too. It was so awesome.